Can't do that. Oh, it is public. Okay. Hey, how's it going, folks? Hope you can hear me well. Please let me know if you can hear me. Does it sound good? You can all hear me. Sounds good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, as you could see in the title, I want to share some information with you that I'm sure can be useful. It doesn't matter if you're uh, serious with magic or not. Now, obviously, I would prefer that you go as deep as you can with this. But even if you're just living a normal life, protection of your aura, as well as understanding how that is connected to the structure of the invisible world, is super important. And today I'm going to give you a quick rundown on some of the most important things that you need to know. Right? I'm a big fan of the Pareto principle, and I try to focus on the 20% that are most important, which are going to give you 80% of the results. Okay. And so let's begin. Your aura, your energy body, is best understood in the context of the structure of the invisible world. So the physical world has a physical body, and that's its place. Your physical body belongs into the physical world, and your physical senses, as well as you know, all parts of it, are very, very well adjusted to the physical world. You have an aura, which is an energy field around that body, and each one of those layers within the aura, within the energy body, belong to their own world as well. Okay. There are different laws that apply to those different worlds because gravity doesn't exist there. It's not a 3D limitation. Even time. Time is not a factor in those invisible worlds. Why? Let's look at your emotional body, for example, which is the body in which you experience your emotions. And the senses that you have in this emotional body are the feeling, the ability to feel emotion. Just like you have senses here in the physical world to touch things, to see things, to hear things, smell things, you have the sense of feeling in the emotional body. Okay, the experience of emotions. When it comes to the mental body, the sense that is active in the mental body is the thought, the ability to think, to conceive of thoughts, and to receive them and to transmit them. Okay, so these other worlds have structures to it, and we have to understand how they work in order to, number one, protect ourselves, and get our way in a sense. Okay, what does that mean? The worlds are interconnected. They are based on kind of different laws, but they're still interconnected. So you can affect the spiritual world by changes in the physical, and you can affect the physical world by changes in the invisible. What we're mainly doing in magic is we're changing the invisible world in order to cause shifts here in the physical world, the physical reality. The physical reality is kind of like our laboratory, our feedback mechanism based on our experiences here. We determine to what extent we have mastered these other worlds, right? Now, you exist in all of those worlds, and you exist more on the other side than you exist here, which unfortunately is, when it comes to most people, they're in a state of amnesia when it comes to that. Okay, so let's assume you uh, go into a public space. Okay, a public space. What's usually going to happen is your energy is going to shift. When I say your energy, I'm talking about the thoughts that come to mind, your emotions, all of that stuff is going to shift. Now, people will give you different explanations on why that is. We'll talk about, I don't know, maybe you you unconsciously picked up body language or something, maybe a threat or whatever, and that shifted how you experience reality. Well, that is part of the truth, but more than that, here's what's going on. Give me 1 second. So when you create a thought form, let's say somebody creates a thought form. What does that mean? They concentrate on a specific idea, and the more they concentrate on it, the more energy is going to be in there, and that thought now exists. Okay, and it exists, let's say, on the mental plane. It also has a certain frequency to it, so it has a certain emotional quality. This is going to be sent out and going to be all over the place. And eventually it's going to hit another mental body and another emotional body, the mental and emotional body of another person. And that is what's going to cause a shift, in the in the mental process as well as in the emotional experience of the person that is being hit by that thought form. Okay. And this happens all the time. And this is the reason why when you enter a different place, or you could even be at home, because this is not necessarily something that can be blocked by walls of stone or something like that. But the shifts that you experience in your mood, in your thoughts, and in the processes that are going on within you are oftentimes caused by thought forms that are just moving through the ether, and they hit your emotional body, they hit your mental body, and shift the frequency of it. Now, let's say somebody creates a thought form that is on the frequency of intense anger. Okay. Now, that thought form is going to be very, very specific, correct? Because he must have had a specific experience that caused that thought form to exist, that put a lot of anger into it. Now, you're not going to have the exact same thought, but you're going to have something that is characteristic or has the characteristic of the thought form that hits you. Okay. So maybe you're not going to be angry about the exact same thing, but you're going to feel anger, you're going to experience anger, and your mind is going to find reasons for it. This is, of course, what you use in remote influence. This is what you use when it comes to, let's say, psychic seduction, and also many spells, many candle spells. Even though I would say that real magic must include the work with spirits. However, nowadays we include these, little candle spells in which you charge a thought form and send it out with a specific intention. We include that in the category of magical practices, right? And this is how it works. You create a strong thought form in this mental plane. You charge it with a lot of energy, and then you send it out. You send it out to um, to whoever the target is. If you're good, if you are a trained magician, you can send that absolutely to a specific individual, and then it's going to hit their energy body. Now, what's important is that uh, the the experience of the person is going to differ based on how much they're involved with something else. You have to understand that we're not capable of existing without um, so we're always existing with the connection to some sort of a thought form. Okay, some people call that egregory, some people call it this and that and the other, whatever. But even if you're just zooming out, even if you're sleeping, even if you're in a deep trance, there's some sort of a thought form that is running through your system. So you can't really exist without thought forms, without being connected to something on the mental plane, because the cause of whatever exists here in the physical world is an idea, a thought form in some way or another. There's a divine plan, a thought form, a platonic idea, you could say, that is the cause for something existing here. And this mental plane is filled with entities, thought forms, ideas, whatever, that are uh, interacting with your mental body, and you can't really exist without being connected to one of them. Now, when you're in deep concentration, or let's say another person is in deep concentration, they're completely involved with a specific task, meaning they're completely plugged into a specific thought form, and their mind is completely occupied by it, and their emotions are completely occupied by that. They're not going to be accessible to the thought form that you sent out. This is why spells work best if you influence someone while they're sleeping, for example, right? When a person gets very concentrated and is really linked up with a specific thought form, their aura gets really hard and really resistant to influence, to external influence. Okay, this is important to keep in mind. So you need to time your spells if you want to use one of those spells to influence someone. You need to time it where the chances are very high that the person is either distracted or zoned out or sleeping or something like that. This is going to this is going to make it easier for you to influence them psychically. Okay. Now, this is also good information for you, of course, if you want to protect yourself from a specific thought form. Just make sure that you put your attention to the extent that you can completely on a specific task or a specific idea that you want to entertain. Okay. Um, See, this invisible world is filled with benevolent thought forms, spirits, and I would like they're not the same thing, obviously, spirits and thought forms and all that stuff, but they kind of like operate in the same way. Spirits are just more complex, more intelligent, have more of their own volition. Thought forms can be they can be very primitive, so to speak. Can be very simple, but they can occupy the mind quite a bit. So you have to control your mind as a magician. This is the most important thing. You have to control your mind. You have to control your emotions, and um, the emotional control is a result of that mental control. You see, so the first thing that you have to learn to control is your thought process. You must be able to control what you focus on, and specifically when you have thoughts that you don't want, when you have thoughts that you don't want to entertain, emotions that you don't want to have, you must be able to completely focus them on something else. You must be able to reaffirm something, to affirm and then reaffirm something in your own mind that matches your own volition, your own will. And as you do that, you must be capable of making that completely real to you. And you do that by continuously focusing on it. Now, I'm describing that a little bit lengthy here, but with a trained magician, a trained mind of a real magician does that like this. Okay. And this is the number one thing. This is the number one line of defense that you have. Okay, 1 second, I'm going to answer this. So, just okay. So the number one thing that you have to learn is to control your mind. Okay, controlling your mind means you need to have complete control over what you focus on. Okay, and this is why concentration exercises are super important in magic. As you become more powerful in your concentration, you will learn and realize through experience. This is not theoretical. Yeah, this is through experience. You're going to realize that you are not your mind, because there must be somebody or something that is able to direct the mind to concentrate on what it is that you decided. So you're not identical with your mind, you're not identical with your thoughts, you're not identical with your emotions, which is one of the most profound realizations that you can have in your spiritual development. Because now you have liberated yourself from this body mind complex, which is a prison for most people. Okay, most people are in a prison of their own minds. They're not in control over it, and therefore their mind makes them suffer. So one of the most important things that we have to do as magicians, as we develop our power, is we have to control the mind. Next, just by virtue, just by virtue of doing that, just by virtue of doing that, you will already have hardened your aura. Okay, there's something that I have talked about many times. Um, there's something I've talked about many times, which is the hardening of your aura is a very, very important part of your practice. Which is, now you understand what that means. Hardening of your aura is the ability to choose the thought form that you want to become one with, or the thing that you want to concentrate on completely. And as you concentrate on it, like I described it earlier, your aura gets really, really hard and hard to influence as well. It's very resistant to magical influence. And this influence that I'm talking about here is not necessarily always the influence of another magician. In fact, that is very, very rare. It's usually just thought forms that are, floating around in the ether. Why? Because people are constantly creating these thought forms. You're doing that all the time. Everybody's doing that all the time. And when they're very powerful, when they have a lot of energy in them, when they're very filled with emotional energy, they gain a lot of traction, and they have a tendency to maintain itself. Okay. And everything that has a tendency to maintain itself must feed itself off of something. You know. Now, the world, as it is set up, the world that we live in, you have to understand, is a society created to enslave the human spirit, so to speak. Enslave uh, the human spirit means that it keeps the energy frequency very, very low. This is why all the architecture that you see out there, this is why the entire system, this is why the news and everything that we are fed in terms of food, in terms of media, in terms of you know um, informational content, is of a low frequency. They even use frequency weapons to lower the frequency of the people, because that's what this world is about. This world is obviously ruled by um, beings and people that have an interest of keeping people in a low frequency, because that makes people easier to control. This is all by design. Make no mistake. We live in a feudal system, essentially, right? And the rulers have certain spiritual connections and associations and knowledge that they use to control the peasants, which is basically 99% of the human population, cattle, the uninitiated. Okay. And it's all designed to create low frequencies and to keep people in a low frequency state, because your frequency determines what you're capable of thinking of. It determines what you're capable of creating. You need to be in a high frequency state in order to create. Okay. And the powers that be will do everything, and they have done everything for many centuries to keep people in a low frequency state. And obviously, they're succeeding. Okay. So, this is not an easy task, but you have to strengthen yourself. Now, somebody talks about, do you practice vampire magic? That's a question here. No, I don't practice vampire magic. Now, first of all, I don't want to deal with the energy of most people, so I'm not sucking energy out of most people, because most people don't have energy that I would want to have. Number two, this is in my opinion, vampire magic is very weak. And most people that deal with that are not powerful at all. Really not. It's just it's just not for me. To each their own. It's just not for me. I never saw the point in it. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to create tension. I'm just wondering if you ever studied it or anything. Yeah, no worries. Yes, of course I've studied it. I've tried it also, because it's important that you know how it works. But there's nothing specifically about it that interests me at all. Uh, what's your take on Franz Barden? Is his information accurate? Yeah, sure. Yeah. I have a question regarding karmic balance when healing versus cursing. Could you balance out the karma of a curse you've put upon another by healing somebody? Uh, yeah, I guess so. You're going to cause a feedback mechanism, sure. And if you wanna use algebra here, or a balance sheet, I guess maybe. I'm not completely sure that it works like that, because it's like nonlinear. But yeah, in my opinion, to be honest, in my opinion, experience positive things are like they have a more powerful ripple effect than negative things. So I would say, and this is not to encourage people to throw curses all the time, but I think through a healing or a positive work, you will create more positive ripple, or sorry, more powerful ripple effects than through a negative action in general. You know, I just think vampire magic is deeper than one would think, and is something happening on a very mass level. Well, yeah, sure, but it's always think about the frequency from which something is done. You know, so see, in the physical world, it is true that things are limited, if that makes sense, or resources are limited. Okay, so if let's say we have a cake and we start sharing the cake, and I give you, let's say, a third of my cake, I have less of a cake. That is true when it comes to a physical world, but when it comes to the world of ideas and energy and all that stuff, this is not the case. So it's actually the opposite. If you give respect out, you will gain respect. If you give give out, let's say, love and positivity, you will gain more back, if that makes sense. It's not a limited resource. When it comes to the mental realm and the spiritual realm, we're not dealing with a realm of limited resources. It's actually completely opposite. The more you give out, the more you attain. It's the same with authority, for example. You can't lose authority by giving it away. In fact, you will gain authority. You can't lose knowledge by giving it away. You will gain knowledge. What I'm doing here today is I'm sharing my experience and I'm helping people uh, to understand maybe their craft better. At least I hope I'm doing that. And maybe you're gaining some insights from what you're hearing. That's what that is going to do, is going to guarantee that I will grow in my understanding. This is how the mental and the spiritual plane works. You see, it's it's counterproductive to be greedy with knowledge, or things like that. So when you're operating spiritually from an understanding of I need to take energy, that's a very low level of consciousness. You understand? Now, I understand that there are entities out there. You could call them vampiric, demonic, or whatever. You know, they just vibrate at that frequency, but they're very, very. They seem powerful, but they're very weak, because this understanding that I just gave you is how the stuff really works. But of course, you will have entities that vibrate at a frequency, and they seem powerful to the uninitiated, but they're actually extremely weak. You know, always think about what frequency you have to be on in order to do a specific action. Being generous and being good and being giving requires being on a powerful frequency. Okay, being vampiric and taking and being greedy and all that stuff, that requires you to be on a low frequency. So um, vampiric magic is comes from a very, very weak point, and is actually the compensation of some feeling of weakness. At least something's being compensated for, some psychological issue, you know, referred to as instinctual. Ah, yes, I understand. I've never seen it like that exactly. However, there is a reason for the chaotic current and the spirit attached to that. I'm gaining insight from this. Thank you. Referred to as instinctual. Yeah, I mean, maybe you've read some Michael W. Ford, or some, I don't know, some of those anti-cosmic currents. I'm not saying that Michael W. Ford is anti-cosmic, whatever. They have their place and all that stuff, and there are definitely people that worship that current of let's say, what do we want to call that, predatory spirituality. But that comes from a very, in my opinion, that comes from an extremely weak point. It exists. If you want, to can explore it, but uh, it's it comes from, in my opinion, an incomplete understanding of what the invisible worlds look like and what they actually entail. You see what I mean? This idea of scarcity, and I have to take, and there's a limited amount of energy, and there's a limited. This is trying to impose limitations of the physical world and transfer that into a spiritual context, which doesn't work. This is also what people do with, let's say, extraterrestrials, for example, or even with natural phenomena. It's called anthropomorphic projection. They try to transfer certain findings that they see in nature and trying to transfer that into the universe. That's not how it works. Now, it is true that there's in the physical universe, let's say in nature, of course, there's predator and prey. Of course, there's competition. Of course, but this is the physical universe. We're talking about spiritual universes here, you know, and in the mental universe and the let's say spiritual universes, scarcity is not real. This is not a concept that exists there. So if you give something away in the spiritual, it will multiply. So you can't lose anything there. Okay. And the same applies to energy. This is why they say that, let's say, if you want money, you should give away what you have. You should do the exact opposite. Most people, when they, let's say, they lack something, let's say they have financial problems, what they do is they get more greedy. They start saving. They get into a contraction state energetically. You have to do the exact opposite. Exactly. If you don't have anything or very little, that's when you should start giving it away, because now you're creating the right energy. You see? I mean, this goes very deep, but based on based on what I just said, I'm sure you can understand why I think that vampirism and psychic vampirism are uh, very weak, weak practices, or rather practices for weak people. Okay. Does semen retention increase the energy behind your magical practice? Yes, but I'm not that deep, or rather, sure. I mean, if you do, I mean, semen contains a lot of energy, obviously, right? So yes, in the minimum that you should do before, let's say, an evocation, for example, is to fast for 3 days, which means 24 hours consecutively without any food, only liquids. So water, coffee, whatever, right? Do that for uh, 24 hours, 3 times straight. And on top of that, if you were to abstain from sex, which is what you probably should do, semen retention, yeah, it can absolutely increase your energy. Yeah, it does. A live in video. Got it. So yeah, maybe you missed the answer. I was saying yes, it's definitely something that can increase your energy for sure. Hmm. Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to mention are banishing rituals. Okay, banishing rituals aim at doing the exact same thing that I just described. Maybe not the exact same thing, but kind of like the same thing as in the as what I described earlier. They make your aura more resistant. They make it more hard, more yeah, resistant to external influences. And there's a whole host. Since the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was so, so influential, really can't be overstated the influence of the Golden Dawn on magic in our part of the world. The Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram uh, is probably one of the most accessible banishing rituals that you're gonna find. I still practice it regularly. I've been practicing the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram for a very, very long time, just like most magicians that have been raised in this tradition, and it's a very powerful one. Yo, Frank, good to see you. And what's a good way to not let negative opinions of others affect your aura? You will be affected by it, but you have to outcreate the destruction. Uh, it is, you living or realizing your goals without any opposition is unfortunately never going to happen. But what you should do is you should outcreate the destruction. So when people go against you, like even just mentally or even saying something, whatever, that's all energy against you, countering your intention. You can't go against it. Ignore it and outcreate. Outcreate, meaning move more energy into the direction of what it is that you want, and eventually you're going to succeed. You got to outcreate your competition or the people that want to destroy you. You got to outcreate the efforts that they put against you. Banishing with what spirits or seal? Yeah, like I said, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is very good. Are there any books you recommend for beginners? Oh, my man. I think I was always hesitant to recommend books, but there's is it 11 Lessons in High Magic by Donald Michael Craig? Donald Michael Craig, and it says either 10 or 11 lessons in high magic, which is very good for beginners. If you're a complete beginner, that's good. Uh, Frank's a good name. Okay, thanks. Okay. Do you practice the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram? I don't practice golden. I do not practice the Golden Dawn system. I do not. But do you practice the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram the Golden Dawn way? Yes. But I wouldn't call it Golden Dawn way. I would call it A.E. Waite's way, the guy that created the ritual. You know. Yeah. Hmm. Frank, can you use a sigil for a specific job, or would it be best to use visualization? How would you go about it? Whatever gets the job done. See, please understand that even if you're using a sigil, you must put a fuck ton of energy into the sigil, or rather, the sigil is more like a link to the thought form that you're creating. Okay, so please understand that this you're not feeding anything into the sigil. The sigil is kind of like a symbol that connects your consciousness to a thought form that exists at a more subtle level. So you must focus on the sigil and then put a fuck ton of energy, emotional energy, into the thought form. How do you do that? By visualizing the outcome. And you visualize it and you make it so real to yourself that all this emotional energy and concentration is fed into the thought form. And then the sigil is kept with you as a connection to the thought form, but the thought form is going to do the job, in which it is through various mechanisms from this more higher realm, from this more subtle level, is going to start affecting the physical level. Okay, by, let's say, influencing maybe the emotions of the people involved and so on and so forth. So yeah, in both cases, you must use a fuck ton of energy, and it really doesn't matter. You can get the job either way, but make sure that there's enough energy in it. How do music lyrics affect your aura? Do you use specific music to heighten, strengthen your structure? My friend, I think this is very easy to figure out. You see, uh, high frequency means orderly, which would translate into harmonious music, and lyrics. I think that's self-evident. What does the person talk about? you know, very. That's really easy. Does the person talk about love and peace and light? You know, and nowadays it's mostly degenerate stuff. Degeneracy, and it's kind of messed up because they're influencing children with that. And music is like a spell. It's like it gets into the subconscious of people and all that stuff. So, is it any wonder that society is so messed up, with all this degenerate music? You go to public places, they're playing, I don't know, I don't want to name names, but you get what I'm saying. Very degenerate music out there these days. Can you recommend a sigil for, let's say, becoming a sugar baby or to attract wealthier men to be attracted to you? Um, I don't think you need a sigil for that specifically. No. Maybe you could work with a certain spirit for that. I don't know. I don't want to encourage that. Let's keep it that. Can I ask a question outside this video topic? Yeah, we've been talking about things that are completely outside of the spectrum. So yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah. Delicious booty. Maybe there's a guy on here that wants a sugar baby. Yeah, maybe you got sugar daddies here. If so, DM delicious booty. It's about your video course on your website. No, then let's not talk about that, please. Let's not talk about that. Okay, we did 42 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully, you got something out of this. And I'm going to wrap it up now. Stay tuned. I'm going to try to go live a little bit more. Hopefully, I can share some information with you on a regular basis. Um, my schedule is super tight. I rarely have time for anything, but I'm going to try. Okay. And uh, stay high. I'll talk to you soon.